So today in Masterclass, we're going to do Coffee Eclairs. And to help me, I think we're going to use Chris. So the first thing we're going to do is make the choux pastry. So put 265 mils of milk, and then I want you to put 210 mils of water into that pan up to the boil with the tablespoon of sugar and the salt. And then Chris, butter. There's about 150 grams of butter. Put that straight into the milk. And what we're going to do is we're going to melt those liquids together. Okay, Chris, milk is boiling, butter's dissolved, sugar and salt's dissolved. So what you need to do is you need to put 260 grams of flour, which is sifted, straight into the boiling milk mixture and then start to stir. So this is going to take about 3 to 4 minutes to continue to cook that out. And then the whole idea is it starts to leave the sides of the pan as the flour absorbs the milk and the butter mixture. And then what's crucial here is that you've got to cook that flour out long enough to develop the gluten in it so that it can take the eggs when you add them in. If you don't do that, you get a really sloppy mixture. And what we're looking for is just so that you've got this cohesive dough that is separating from the sides of the pan, and when I fold it over, is that nice, see that nice shiny surface? That's what I'm looking for. Okay? Off, straight into that bowl, and I want you to knock out a bit of that heat. The reason we're going to knock a little bit of that heat out is because if it's too hot, and we put our eggs in, it's going to scramble the eggs. So it's cooled down a wee bit. Now we're going to add the eggs. Now, there's 8 eggs in this recipe. The reason there are a lot of eggs is that in choux pastry with eclairs, eggs are the raising agent. So first 2 eggs are going in. You can start mixing. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to butter a tray lightly, just so we can pipe our eclairs on. Right, last 2 eggs. Piping bag, piping tube. Now, what you want to do is that this hand must be like that. And the reason it must be like that is because you want it to be nice and open. And when you put it in, you're actually using that thumb, that crook, to wipe that. Okay. You can keep that nice and clean, you see, because it goes in, and it goes in like that. And then shake it down, make sure there's no air in it. And then we'll pipe our eclairs. But basically what you want to do is you want to be able to pipe it so that it's the thickness of the tube. So gentle pressure, and then just flick it back on itself. All right? When you put it down, don't squash it. See how mine aren't squashed? Oh, yeah. The reason we've spaced them out is they're going to puff up, probably double their size as they cook. All right? So into the oven, and they get baked at 210, 220 to start with, okay? Which gives it that push, that sharp puff. And they'll take about 20 minutes to cook, all right? And then you dry at 180, so then it bakes thoroughly without getting too dark. What you must not do in their puffing stage is keep opening the door, because all the heat goes out. All right? Chris, thanks very much. Hope you learned something.
I did.
While the choux pastry is baking, I'm going to do the topping for the eclair. And I'm using fondant, sugar fondant, which is this very soft, stretchy sugar. Now, the key with this stuff is that it can't really go over sort of blood temperature. And what I'm looking for here is hot, but not too hot that I have to go, ow. Yeah, feeling again, not too hot. And what I can see is that it's starting to get sort of shiny and soft in the bottom of the pot, all right? Any questions about this fondant, Sam?
So you're actually not trying to melt that, you're actually just trying to loosen it.
I'm warming it.
Yeah.
So I am melting it.
Yeah.
It's just that at room temperature, that fondant icing is really stiff and sticky. And what I want it to be is soft, shiny, and fluid. Okay? Because as it cools, it will then stiffen and set. So I'm going to dip up an eclair into it. Okay. And then as it cools, it'll set. Okay. All right? If you couldn't find sugar fondant, could you substitute something else? You can use chocolate. Like you could dip them in chocolate. That's okay. Now I'm going to flavour the fondant icing. And what I've got here is a coffee essence. It's made with coffee grounds and sugar syrup. You can use free-dried coffee, instant coffee. You just dissolve it into water, throw a heap of sugar in it, bring it to the boil until you get a lovely coffee syrup. So I'm going to put some in. See what's happening? That is our coffee fondant for the eclairs. Nice and soft, ready for our choux pastry to dip into. Beautiful. So the eclairs are cooked and cooled. Our coffee fondant is ready. And George, you're going to help me fill?
Yes. Today we're going to fill our coffee eclairs with a simple vanilla bean cream. There's a little bit of icing sugar in there for sweetness, and of course, fresh vanilla bean scraped into there. First, we need to make a little hole and then fill our piping bag up with our vanilla bean cream. And then, because you can't see it, you want to feel some weight in it and apply enough pressure without it exploding. So you can just feel the pressure going through the eclair.
Now the eclairs are filled with cream, we're going to now dip them into the coffee fondant. OK, you ready with that? All yours?
Right, so dip. Run your clean finger over there. Right.
They look beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So while George does that, I'm going to make some chocolate. I'm going to pipe coffee on each one. George, don't eat those.
I had to.
There was one extra, wasn't there?
One extra. I couldn't put it on.
So I've melted some cooking chocolate over warm water. Again, don't overfill the piping bag. And what I'm looking for is just to pipe out a thread of chocolate. And I'm just going to nick the end off nice and cleanly with a sharp knife. And the whole idea with piping is that you attach the chocolate and you lift up and you let the thread dribble out naturally, and that's how you create a letter. Gee, I haven't done this for a few years. Wish me luck, huh?
Just write George on them all.
It's not a bad idea. So, there's another beautiful way to use choux pastry, and in this case, coffee eclairs. So, top tips for making choux pastry: weigh the ingredients. Second, cook the panade or the batter out until it leaves the sides of the pan. It has to cook for 3 and 4 minutes, develop the gluten, otherwise the mixture is not going to be cohesive enough to take all the eggs. Number 3, adding the eggs. In this recipe, 2 at a time. You can feel that it's a little bit slippery, but it'll draw together, and what you're looking for by the time you've added the last egg is a nice cohesive dough. And what I do is look between the folds. It must shine between the folds. Chris, come up.
Which is the biggest one?
I don't know.
They're heavy.
Oh, yeah.
The texture's great. That light, spongy choux pastry, and then you get the dense cream.
Nice. You like that?
Beautiful.
Gorgeous?
Absolutely stunning.
Beautiful.
Have another bite then.
I will.
Or I will.
Okay.